I never had to ask myself the question about, how do you go about finding the right church, and how do you know that this is the church for you, and committing to the church, like, is it the right church to commit to, and all of these things. I've never necessarily asked myself that question because I grew up in a Christian household, so I just went to the church my mom went to, and now I'm married, I go to the church my husband goes to, and it's his family church. He grew up in that church. So this past Sunday, we both went to visit this new church in our neighborhood, and it was very interesting. And it made me ask the question of, Wuti, how do you know that this is the church that you're supposed to go to? How do you know that this is the right church? This church has God in it. You know what I mean? And I started asking myself that question on Friday, on Sunday. I'm sorry, on Sunday. But I was doing my Bible study on Friday, and something stood out for me in Mark 8, verse 15. I even highlighted it because I didn't even understand why it stood out, because I didn't even make a note about this thing. I just highlighted it, and then I made a note about verse 16 to 19, because the disciples have a moment of doubt, and Jesus has to remind them of who he is in their moment of doubt. But I highlighted this part. Mark 8, verse 15 says, Jesus warned, "Be very careful, keep a sharp eye out for the contaminating yeast of the Pharisees and the followers of Herod," right? So now I went into my Bible dictionary during that time, and I made some notes and I highlighted some stuff, and I wanted to understand why is he using the metaphor yeast in this context. And it says, yeast is, as yeast spreads through dough, their hypocrisy, unbelief, and misleading teachings could spread negatively and affect others. So they have negative teachings. And then, it was like, okay, so do not be influenced by the legalism and the spiritual blindness of the Pharisees, of the power and corruption of Herod and, the government of that time. So I kind of understood it as, okay, it's pretty much just that. We just be careful. But I didn't think about, how deep you have to be situationally careful. So we go to this church on Sunday, and I asked my husband, would we go back, and we discuss it. A lot of things happened. It's not my place to talk about other people's churches, but whatever. So I'm going through the week and I'm having Bible study, and I get to Luke 4, and I'm reading from this Bible here. I'm reading from this Bible. This is a new Bible that I bought myself last year as a wedding gift. And I bought it because of this situation right here, because I could write and make notes on it right there, right? So when I got to books, I was like, I'm looking for a Bible where I can make notes, and they showed me a few different Bibles, and then I just took this one. I didn't really research. I didn't really kind of look at who wrote the Bible and the group. Is the group legit or anything like that? It's a Bible. I took it. I didn't even think deeply about it. And then this was the first Bible that I committed to in 2021 when I finally decided to take my faith seriously. Went around the house. I'm lucky I grew up with a person who's very also committed. My mother has a lot of different versions of Bibles inside the house. So I found a version that I felt that I could read and understand, easily process. It's today's English. It's good news. It's very simple to understand and read, and I read it. I've read this one cover to cover. It's even kind of falling apart there. I read it cover to cover. So now, Bible study, I'm reading, and I get to Luke 4, verse 12, where it says, "Do not tempt the Lord your God." And I'm like, do not tempt the Lord your God. I know this verse from memory. It's supposed to be test. So I go to the old Bible and I look through, and it says, "Do not put your Lord your God to the test." And I'm wondering, are tempt and test, do they mean the same? Because it's one story, right? And I look at the headings in the Bibles, and there's different headings. This one says tested by the devil, and then the old one says the temptation of Jesus. So luckily I also have a version on my Bible, so on my phone. So I go to the one on my phone and I look at the King James Version. The King James Version also says tempt. So I'm wondering, do these things mean the same? So I go to ChatGPT. Unfortunately, Bible study, I'm by myself, so I can't bounce off my ideas off of somebody else. I just have to do. So we use technology. And I go to ChatGPT and I ask him, are testing and tempting the same? And ChatGPT says, testing is often a challenge or trial meant to assess someone's faith, strength, or ability. It can be a way to refine and strengthen a person, like when gold is purified through fire. For example, God tested Abraham's faith when he asked him to sacrifice Isaac, not to cause him to fail, but to reveal and strengthen his trust in God. Temptation often comes with the intention of leading someone into sin or failure. In the Bible, Satan tempted Jesus in the wilderness, trying to pull him away from righteousness. So I asked the question of, let's see, why do these Bible versions use this different words, right? And it says, okay, Luke 4 recounts how Jesus led into the wilderness and faced trials from the devil. The Standard English Version, calling it the temptation of Jesus, aligns with the idea that Satan was deliberately trying to lead him into sin, attempting to make him act outside of God's will. In biblical language, temptation often carries a negative connotation, an attempt to draw someone away from righteousness. This other version that's calling it a test could be emphasizing the idea that Jesus was demonstrating his faith, his endurance, and obedience under difficult circumstances. In this sense, his experience could be seen as a test of his resolve to follow God's will, rather than to be swayed by personal desires. However, the primary intent of the devil was temptation, not a test designed to strengthen Jesus. That's why most translations refer to it as temptation rather than a test. Jesus resisted, showing his unwavering faith, which proved his strength. But the purpose of the encounter wasn't to refine him, as a test might be, but to try and make him fail. Okay, but then when we go back to the beginning of Luke 4, and even if you go to Matthew 4, it says that full of the Holy Spirit was led into the wilderness to be tested. So wouldn't you say that this is God's doing rather than the devil's doing? You know what I mean? I kind of feel like, okay, AI is right, definitely saying what he's saying of the temptation, why they use temptation. If you see it from this perspective, you're going to say it's Satan's hand at work, and really the test wasn't to refine him, it was just to make him fall. You know what I mean? So that would be your perspective. And then if you read it from the test perspective, it would be, you would see God was testing him and he was refined. He was refined because after that, when you start to read from verse 14, it says, full powerful in the spirit. So obviously this test came with a result. The result was he was powerful in the spirit. He was clearly refined. So the understanding of, Satan's intention was not to refine him, but if you go to the beginning and you see that he was led by the Spirit of God, so it was to refine him. Just because the devil was used by God to make that situation doesn't change that it's God's hand. But then I realized that it's a matter of perspective. It's how you choose to see it, right? So you can see it as God's hand at work, or you can see it as the devil's hand at work. That's your choice. So then I realized, even the Bible that you read kind of influences the way you go about. Because I did ask someone this question of, it seems to me like a lot of pastors have been focusing on us being attacked by the enemy and the devil and all these spiritual things that are happening. Fine, I get it. There are things out there that are definitely attacking us. But God also uses those things to attack us in order to refine us and to strengthen us, right? So you could see your trial, or you could see a challenge that you're going through it as the devil's attacking me, and I should find the person who's bewitching me, and I should make them stop, but really you can't because that's the person's doing, but that's neither here or there. And you can sit and you can concentrate on the person and all of these things that are going wrong. Or you can say, I'm no longer under God's protection. How did I move from God's protection? What is God trying to do in this? Is he refining me? Is he getting me to be obedient? Is he realigning me? Is he using me for purpose in his name's sake? Just like Job. Remember with Job, literally the protection of God had to be lifted. It says that, lifted off of him so that he could be attacked by the devil. So if you're under God's protection, you are not easily susceptible to these witchcraft attacks, if I can say that. And even the witchcraft people, past demonic people, have come out with testimonies and said there were certain people that we couldn't touch, that we couldn't attack, because they were always under this protection, this protection, this protection. So it's you who chooses either to focus on the devil and the enemy that's attacking you, or you can choose to focus on God and getting into the realignment. So it made me think, Goputi, even the Bible that you read and the version can influence your understanding. Because if you just stick to the devil's influence and just focus on that, then you're missing God's hand in certain situations that he does in your life. And you know what I mean? Okay, so why it happened in the church? I'm not a person who likes to talk about churches and spill the tea. And I understand churches are different and everybody's trying to do what they feel is the best way to praise God. Fine, I get it. It was just that in that space, I felt like it was wrong. My opinion, remember, for the pastor, he was supposed to be giving sermon, yabo, and he's on the pulpit talking about witchcrafts trying to kill him and all of these things. And I would refer in this situation for the pastor to do Luke 5. I'm going to read from Luke 5 verse 14. From verse 14, Jesus instructed him. This is the guy that he just healed from having leprosy. Jesus instructed him, don't talk about this all over town. Just quickly present your healed self to the priest along with an offering ordered by Moses. Your cleansed and obedient life, not your words, will bear witness to what I have done. Yeah, well, so I felt like for him, because for a newcomer like me, I didn't see anything wrong with him. He looked very healthy to me. There was no deformity on him to say, oh no, he was walking funny, and then there was a drool on his face that meant he had to explain, oh, he was just attacked and all these things. He was fine. Again, my opinion, he was fine. But he chose to give the witchcraftery a platform at that time in his pulpit, instead of standing proud and tall and praising God and showing that you didn't get me. Because he made it, the person doing all of these things is here in the church. The witchcraftery is here. So now, as a newcomer, that doesn't make me want to join your church if you guys have witchcraftery. And even more, I felt like he's dividing the congregation, because now the people in the congregation have to look out for witchcraftery amongst themselves. It feels like it would divide them rather than bringing them closer as a community. I mean, would you invite anybody to church knowing that somebody's witchcrafting the pastor? I'm just asking. But the bigger question comes to Vedegutsi. We watch all of these people. Sometimes I ask myself the question at church, and I've caught this a few times, that pastors sometimes make the mistake, like we all do, and they'll make the little mistake, like referring to Jacob as Joseph when he means to say the other person, but he's talking about the other person's story. That's a simple mistake, You can call Ruth Elizabeth, but you mean to Mary. There's so many people's names, and sometimes the names are the same people. You just have to know which person, which Joseph they're talking about, right? And then sometimes the pastor makes bigger mistakes, and then you have to go read it and say, but how did you get to that conclusion after reading this simple thing that I read so many times and I can't make the same alignment as you? But then when I catch it, as we look around and nobody else is saying anything, and then you feel like maybe you're the person who's crazy, who's hearing something that you shouldn't be hearing, because it seems like everybody else is going along with what the pastor's saying. So even that sometimes is like, oh, as a newcomer, as a baby Christian, do I have the right to even question the pastor? I mean, the appropriate thing, I guess, to do in this situation is after church, just go and ask him more detail for him to elaborate and maybe clarify what he was saying, and then he could even in more detail, because they have access to books and some of them, they read the original languages that we don't read of the Bible, you know what I mean? And we have to trust that what they are saying is accurate. And then you have to also trust that the way you're being influenced by whatever he just said is in the right way, because you're going to go and live this thing out, you know what I mean? But it all comes back to, we have to be careful and mindful. Even he says it, we have to be very mindful of the people who influence and shape the way we think and approach and do things in relative to our faith. And I think the only person who can really kind of guide you to and lead you to say this is right, this is wrong, is Jesus himself. That's why it's good to have your own relationship based on your own understanding, not on what other people say. But I would really like to know, firstly, which version of Bible are you currently reading that you feel is influencing you in the right way? And also, how do we go about finding the right church, guys? Like, honestly, what questions or what things should we look out for when we're going into a new environment, not knowing anyone, not knowing nothing? We can't just concentrate when the choir was popping. The pastor's sermon was really good. He was enthusiastic. Okay, me for also is not a very fan of enthusiastic pastors. I don't like pastors who scream. I don't like pastors who jump up and down. You see, it's a whole lot of things. But then I can't say these pastors are wrong because they do all of those things. They have their people. But what is it that you really have to look out for? Firstly, I know the answer is always pray for discernment. Pray for the Lord to guide you to where you're supposed to be is always the answer. But it's gotta, I don't know, there's gotta be more to it than just that. I always say that to my husband sometimes when his answer to me is discernment. I know it's the right answer and pretty much the only answer in certain situations, but it feels to me like it's not enough. It's not enough. There's gotta be something more tangible to it than that. So let's just comment, guys. Let me know, what do you use to gauge and measure a church? Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.